Good day, ma'am. Our topic for today is specific learning disabilities. Specific learning disabilities refer to a group of specific lifelong cognitive impairments identified through the unexpected underachievement in a range of learning process involving the skills of listening, speaking, spelling, written expression, mathematics, understanding, or reading, including decoding and comprehension. Specific learning disabilities are distinct from intellectual disabilities in that they are specific and not global impairments. This means that specific learning disabilities will only impact particular areas of learning, such as spelling or memory, whereas an intellectual disabilities or global impairment will impact every aspect of an individual cognitive function. Dyslexia is the common specific learning disabilities comprising 80% of the diagnosis of specific learning disabilities. Dyslexia relates primarily to barriers in the acquisition of the reading and writing skills. Aside from academic barriers, people with specific learning disabilities can also experience barriers in time management, organizational skills, social perception, and social interaction. The experience of specific learning disabilities varies from person to person and can be more disabling when there are greater barriers in the learning environment. As a hidden disability, the prevalence of the specific learning disability is frequently underestimated. International estimates indicate that specific learning disabilities impact approximately 10% of the population. Types of specific learning disabilities typically comprise of dyslexia, impacting reading and writing, dyscalculia, impacting processing of numbers and maths, and dysgraphia, impacting of the mechanics of handwritten. Dyslexia is associated with the specific barriers in reading, writing, spelling, or comprehension. Dyslexia is the common specific learning disabilities affecting approximately 80% of the people and specific learning disabilities. International Dyslexia Association, because dyslexia is related to literacy skills, it is most evident in educational settings. Students with dyslexia can experience barriers in one or collection of the below, like visual perception of letters and words and their corresponding sounds and phonics, memory, vocabulary, spelling of the spoken words, comprehension. Dyscalculia is associated with barriers in understanding numbers and mathematical concepts. Dyscalculia is estimated to occur in up to 3% of the population. For individuals with dyscalculia, it may be difficult to visualize patterns, different parts of the math problems, and identify critical information needed to solve equations and more complex problems. Dyscalculia can affect a person's ability to think quantitatively, do arithmetic, understand and measure time and space, remember times tables, and perform basic calculation. Dysgraphia is associated with restriction in writing tasks. Dysgraphia can affect skill associated with holding a pen or pencil, such as drawing shapes, numbers, or letters. Dysgraphia is a neurological disorder that typically appears when using the complex collection of motor and information processing skills involved in the activity of writing. Not only does it require the ability to organize and express ideas in the mind, it also requires the ability to get the muscles in the hands and fingers to form those ideas letter by letter. On paper, a person with dysgraphia may write the letters in reverse, have trouble recalling how letters are formed, or when to use lower or upper case letters.
Specific learning disabilities terminology. A range of terms are applied to specific learning disabilities, including learning disabilities, dyslexia, specific learning disorders, language disorders, and learning difficulties. Variation in specific learning disabilities nomenclature is to expound the difficulty in understanding the defining features of an specific learning disabilities. In addition, non-diagnostic terms such as reading disorders or learning difficulty do not provide definitive information about processing barriers for students with specific learning disabilities. These can result in inappropriate support for students with specific learning disabilities according to Blizzard 2010 and McDonald 2009. As a result, generic non-diagnostic labeling of the students with specific learning disabilities discourage, and students are advised source in a specific learning disabilities diagnosis to acquire the most detailed understanding of their strengths, weaknesses, and processing preferences. What is the example? Specific learning disability is an umbrella term that can describe many different types of learning issues, including dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. Different types of specific learning disabilities require different interventions. The differences between learning disability and specific learning disability. A note on terminology: specific learning disorder is a medical term used for diagnosis. It is often referred to as learning disorder. Learning disability is a term used by both the educational and legal systems. There are 13 specific learning disabilities: autism, deaf-blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, or visual impairment.
The top 5 most common learning disabilities and their symptoms. First is dyslexia. Dyslexia is probably the number one learning disorder. Auditory processing, visual processing disorders may have trouble that affect children and adults. It's a condition that makes it challenging to understand text or speech. If you have dyslexia, reading, writing, and speaking can be difficult and overwhelming.
Some symptoms of dyslexia include reversing the position of letters, struggling with reading comprehension, delayed speech, difficulty learning auditory processing disorder, new vocabulary or rhymes. Having disorders, visual processing may have trouble understanding directions.
Number 2. Did you know that over 6 million children are diagnosed with paying attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Many children with attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder are disciplined for misbehaving, but they can control their actions. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder makes it difficult to concentrate, which can lead to one children distracting and others around them in classroom setting. Some symptoms of attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder are as follows: unable to sit still, being disorganized or forgetful, difficulty staying quiet and attentive, lack of motivation, mood swings or emotional outbursts. Number 3, dyscalculia. Lots of people dislike math, but they're eventually able to understand it with enough practice. Dyscalculia is more severe because it's diagnosing a learning disability that makes it challenging to understand even the most basic math concepts. Since math builds upon itself, children with dyscalculia can fall behind and struggle to catch up for years. Some symptoms of dyscalculia include struggling with concepts such as measuring time and estimating, being unsure of how to approach word math problems, difficulty following the order of operations, finding it challenging to count and group numbers together with you, learning disabilities. What are the different types? Number 2, dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is an affect learning disability that makes it hard to write legibly. Some people with dysgraphia struggle spoken language to hold a writing utensil comfortably, while others lack the spatial awareness needed to produce legible text. Some symptoms of dysgraphia are as follows: messy handwriting, taking a long time to write, holding a writing utensil properly, struggling to express thoughts in a clear sentence structure, poor grammar, speaking out loud while writing. Number 5, dyspraxia. Although the dyspraxia is a condition that affects someone's motor skills, it still has the potential to hinder affect specific learning. The reason why is because a person with dyspraxia may not be able to hold a pencil or participate by speaking regularly. Dyspraxia mostly interferes with hand-eye coordination skills. Dyspraxia presents itself differently in each affects a person, but some symptoms include poor balance and struggling with fine motor tasks. Since despite common learning disabilities, education affects such a large portion of our population, it's important for everyone to stay informed so we can learn to recognize the symptoms. The causes of basic learning disability: alcohol or harmful drug exposure in utero, birth or trauma or distress, exposure to neurologic or central nervous system injury in utero of after birth, heredity, lack of nurturing environment, low birth weight, medications such as cancer or leukemia treatment in children.